Hi, welcome to this game review. In this game we will see a lot of themes related to pawn play. Some ideas were missed, some ideas were played, but let's have a look. So the game started as the Vienna game, and black played this slightly dangerous variation with bishop c5. It's considered not very good because precisely queen g4 attacks g7 and black doesn't really have a convenient way of defending it. Instead, probably knight f6 is a bit better. For example, d3 is usually played. The simplest way to play is probably knight a5, take away this bishop, and continue developing. And okay, bishop c5, queen g4. Now queen goes to f6. Now white gets some initiative with knight d5, allowing knight queen f2. Now black has to play king f8, defending from this and also the fork. After knight h3, black finds the only move h5, and after knight f2, which is a big mistake, black eventually got some advantage. So here after queen g5, it is white who has some advantage, and also it's quite difficult to find good moves for black. He has to go queen to d4. For d3, this queen is very uncomfortable. Black's only move is bishop e7, and even then white is a bit better due to his initiative and better development. But here, after the dust settles, black got some advantage. Now he is a bit better developed, so to say, and he is creating some threats. Knight to e3, and here black decides to part with the bishop pair, but this does get rid of the dangerous knight on d5. Here white could take with the pawn. This would technically win this c7 pawn, but now the structure would be very bad, and for example here the knight may even get trapped after the check. Well, it won't get trapped, but black will get back this pawn. He has some initiative, which is why white took with the knight. Black continues development, and here again black should probably continue his development one way or another. He has these two pieces that are not playing. Instead, black goes to take away white's light-squared bishop, the bishop pair advantage, which has its own logic, though probably knight g4 is a bit more to the point. Here black is trying to develop this light-squared bishop. For example, if takes. This is quite fine for black. He'll develop his king, maybe double on the h-file, maybe play f5. And black is a little bit better since his rook is a bit more active, and his bishop is probably controlling a bit better squares, while this one is not developed either. White does have the bishop pair, but at any point black can get rid of it with bishop e6. Then knight e5 has its own logic. Bishop b3, though this move doesn't really do much for white, as we will see. Black takes, a takes b. And this is in general a structural improvement for white, though the a-file in such cases isn't necessarily too important, and because black can usually play a6, after which b4, b5 is an idea for white, but it's only a tactical idea. If the rook gets protected, then this won't really be a big threat. Here black plays c6, which is a bit abstract. It's not clear why black is putting his pawns on light squares with a light square bishop, and also it's not clear why this would be the most useful move in the position. He still has to develop the bishop and the rook, and so bishop e6 is screaming to be played. We have to get in the habit of developing the pieces that are not developed and making less useful moves only later, unless we have a compelling reason to do otherwise. And here, for example, king e2, we can even play d5, but we can also develop the king. White can't really do much on the a-file. He can finish development, but we can play a6 to be able to move the rook. Then maybe double on the h-file to provoke h3. Maybe put a knight on f4 or g3 if allowed. Maybe d5 as well. And at these positions we can even start thinking about c6 as our pieces are developed, so now we can find some kind of plan. But now c6, king goes to e2, and here, well, if black played c6, then it would make sense to play d5. And here d5 is a strong move because white is forced to take, which would make c6 look very smart. And here, after bishop e6, a6, the rook can go to c8 to attack this weakness on c2. It is a backward pawn. Also, black has some good center control, and he's again a little bit better. But king e7 was played, bishop d2, bishop e6. Now black finishes development. White changes the position of knight f5, but black is not in trouble here. Next, he plays this move rook h5, which would be a very good move if not for h3. A bit of a hidden resource. Now we cannot take the pawn because after g4 the rook is trapped. So if we cannot take the pawn and we put our rook on h5, it seems that it is a mistake, since g4 is kind of useful for white. He has a 3-on-2 majority on the king side here. Instead, black should probably play on the queen side and the center, or maybe get rid of this annoying pawn with g6, while this pin is not here yet. For example, after this, black has a nice move rook h to g8, and later taking here, though maybe white has some advantage here. Maybe it's better to use this rook actually. Rook h to g8, not a to g8. Rook h5, h3. Now black plays a6 to be able to use the rook, and again after a6 this a file is not too useful for white. He can use it for some rook transit, but it's not very important. g4, rook goes to h7, which means black is leaving this square for the other rook. Bishop g5, and now black plays a very bad move with g6, and it's very bad because it creates an eternal pin. Before, this pin was not that important because black could just move his king. For example, he can put his rook on h8, instantly attacking this pawn, making white go here. And now black can just move his king, and this way attack the g4 pawn, also threatening to move the knight and go f6 to attack the h4 pawn. For example, after this, we can remaneuver the knight somewhere else, play f6, which means white has to play h5 to not allow f6 and rook takes h4. And for example, after c5 or f6 first, maybe king f7 or c5, black has good dark square control. He will eventually remaneuver his pieces somewhere else. This pawn majority is not very mobile, though white is a bit better here. But already black played g6, but after this is just a very painful pin, and white can double on the f file very comfortably, and black will be in a lot of pain, as happened. Though here white decided to kind of get rid of the tension and go towards a pawn endgame, though there was no need. White can just double, and the pin is eternal because black can't really get out of it at any point. For example, here you can try king e6, but importantly there is bishop to h6. So a small tactical detail. The point is, after we move the rook, there is g5, and we lose a piece because this is also a pin, not only the diagonal. So this was very dangerous by black, and also even if there wasn't this eternal pin, we're giving the chance for white to get a pawn endgame, which in general will be better for him here because he has a distant passed pawn. And pawn endgames, distant passed pawns are very dangerous, as we will see later. So there was absolutely no need to play g6. Black can again just move his king or play rook h8 first to provoke h4, and he's not in big trouble, though playing with the rook so much did cost some tempo. But g6, white decides to exchange, but this pawn endgame is fine for white. For black, h4, king is f7, and right, and we arrived at this pawn endgame. And in general, such pawn endgames should be good for white because he has the distant passed pawn. So the general plan would be to push the pawn, distract the king, and then use our king to take these pawns. Though in this position this is impossible because there are too many pawns on the board and the king does not have a way through. If it was here, for example, it could go here, but it is a long way away and black can stop it. So after king e3 he plays d5, importantly, not allowing the king to advance anywhere. The positions should be drawn. White plays b4, and at some point black can just play g5, surprisingly, giving a connected passed pawn or a distant passed pawn for white, but as long as the king stays here the pawn will never become a queen. Well, it can even go here. This would be the square. Importantly, white does not have a way to break through on the upper side. The king will never break through anywhere. It cannot go to a5 because we will play b6, and also c4 we will not react. In general, we want to keep the pawn on d5, and this is just a positional draw. b6 is fine, c4, but now white plays a very bad blunder, a5, after which white can win in a variety of ways actually, but creating this pawn tension on the queen side is quite useless. Black's point was probably that if white takes, then this is fine, kind of similarly to the previous variation of g5, though here again white has some chances to go to the a4 square potentially. But here white has a good pawn break of c5, creating the passed pawn on the a file, and along with this one black has zero chances to save the game here, and it's basically over here. And again, black should just stop all the queen side play. He really doesn't want to open the queen side. White is not really threatening anything at this point, so black can even move the king and see what white does. But probably more concrete is b5 to stop everything on the queen side. Now white will never be able to get to a5 as we see. He has no route to c5 either, so white can just not make any progress. Black is not necessarily threatening anything, but next he can just move the king around and just ask white what he is doing. After all, it is white who is trying to win, technically, because he has the distant passed pawn while this one is not really alive yet. But after this, c5, the game is over. White creates a queen. This counterplay is not enough, and the rest is not very necessary. So there were some pawn themes in this game. The first mistake was probably c6, though it's not necessarily a mistake, but if we play c6 we should play d5. Importantly, white has to take. He can go king f3, but then we can take this pawn on h4, e4. Later black somehow missed this h3 move, which lost him the initiative, and playing g6 is very uncareful, creating this very dangerous spin, which will be very hard to escape, and in the best case black will get a pawn endgame, which is not necessarily a good thing. Black shouldn't think about pawn endgames at this point. Instead, find a way to rearrange your pieces, put your rook here and pin your king, move the knight, and go from there.